The War of the Pacific took place in western South America from 1879 to 1883, with Bolivia and Peru on one side and Chile on the other. The core issues were territorial claims and mining rights in the Atacama Desert. After the war ended with a Chilean victory, Chile gained a significant amount of land from Peru and Bolivia, making Bolivia a landlocked country. Battles were fought in a variety of terrain, including the Pacific Ocean, the Atacama Desert, Peru's deserts, and mountainous regions in the Andes. For the first 5 months, the war played out in a naval campaign, as Chile struggled to establish a sea-based resupply corridor for its forces in the world's driest desert. The war is a dramatic landmark in the history of South America and stands as one of the most significant military encounters of the late 19th century. It has attracted a considerable amount of scholarly interest. In February 1878, Bolivia imposed a new tax on a Chilean mining company despite Bolivian express warranty in the 1874 boundary treaty it would not increase taxes on Chilean persons or industries for 25 years. Chile protested against the tax increase and solicited to submit it to mediation, but Bolivia refused and considered it a subject of Bolivia's courts. Chile insisted and informed the Bolivian government that Chile would no longer consider itself bound to the 1874 boundary treaty if Bolivia did not suspend enforcing the law. On February 14, 1879, when Bolivian authorities attempted to auction the confiscated property of CSFA, Chilean armed forces occupied the port city of Antofagasta. Peru, bound with Bolivia by their secret Treaty of Alliance between Peru and Bolivia of 1873, tried to mediate. But on 1 March 1879, Bolivia declared war on Chile and called on Peru to activate their alliance, while Chile demanded that Peru declare its neutrality. On April 5, after Peru refused this, Chile declared war on both nations. The following day, Peru responded by acknowledging the casus foederis. Ronald Bruce Street. John in The Bolivia-Chile-Peru Dispute in the Atacama Desert, states, even though the 1873 treaty and the imposition of the 10 centavos tax proved to be the casus belli, there were deeper, more fundamental reasons for the outbreak of hostilities in 1879. On the one hand, there was the power, prestige, and relative stability of Chile compared to the economic deterioration and political discontinuity which characterized both Peru and Bolivia after independence. On the other, there was the ongoing competition for economical and political hegemony in the region, complicated by a deep antipathy between Peru and Chile. In this milieu, the vagueness of the boundaries between the three states, coupled with the discovery of valuable guano and nitrate deposits in the disputed territories, combined to produce a diplomatic conundrum of insurmountable proportions. Afterwards, Chile's land campaign bested the Bolivian and Peruvian armies. Bolivia was defeated and withdrew after the Battle of Tacna on May 26, 1880. The Peruvian army was defeated in the Battle of Arica on June 7, 1880. The land campaign climaxed in 1881 with the Chilean occupation of Lima in January 1881. Peruvian army remnants and irregulars waged a guerrilla war against Chile. This campaign of the Brenner was a resistance movement, but did not change the war's outcome. After Peru's defeat of the Battle of Huamachuco in July 1883, Chile and Peru signed the Treaty of Ancon on October 20, 1883. Bolivia signed a truce with Chile in 1884. Chile acquired the Peruvian territory of Tarapacá, the disputed Bolivian department of Littoral, as well as temporary control over the Peruvian provinces of Tacna and Arica. In 1904, Chile and Bolivia signed the Treaty of Peace and Friendship, establishing definite boundaries. The 1929 Tacna-Arica Compromise gave Arica to Chile and Tacna to Peru. Etymology: it is also known as the Saltpeter War, as the 10 Cents War in reference to the controversial 10-centavo tax imposed by the Bolivian government, or as the Second Pacific War, not to be confused with the Saltpeter War, a pre-Columbian war, nor the Guano War, as the Chincha Islands War is sometimes named. Winu is a Quechua word for fertilizer. Potassium nitrate and sodium nitrate are nitrogen-containing compounds collectively referred to as salpeter, saltpeter, salita, calica, or nitrate. They are used as fertilizer, with also other important uses. Hence the words officina, or officina salitera for saltpeter works. The word Atacama had two meanings. It was and is a Chilean region, then province, south of the Atacama Desert. The Atacama Desert mostly coincides with the disputed Antofagasta province, also named Littoral in Bolivia. Background: the Atacama border dispute between Bolivia and Chile concerning the sovereignty over the coastal territories between approximately the parallels 23 degrees south and 24 degrees south was just one of several long-running border conflicts in South America after the independence throughout the 19th century. Since uncertainty characterized the demarcation of frontiers according to the UTI Posititis 1810, the dry climate of the Peruvian and Bolivian coasts had permitted the accumulation and preservation of vast amounts of high-quality guano deposits and sodium nitrate. In the 1840s, Europeans knew the guano and nitrate's value as fertilizer and saltpeter's role in explosives. The Atacama Desert became economically important. Bolivia, Chile, and Peru were located in the area of the largest reserves of a resource the world demanded. During the Chincha Islands War, Spain, under Queen Isabella II, attempted to exploit an incident involving Spanish citizens in Peru to re-establish Spanish influence over the guano-rich Chincha Islands. Starting from the Chilean silver rush in the 1830s, the Atacama Desert was prospected and populated by Chileans. Chilean and foreign enterprises in the region eventually extended their control to the Peruvian saltpeter works. In the Peruvian region of Tarapacá, Peruvian people constituted a minority behind both Chileans and Bolivians. Boundary Treaty of 1866. Bolivia and Chile negotiated the Boundary Treaty of 1866. The treaty established the 24th parallel south from the littoral of the Pacific to the eastern limits of Chile, as their mutual boundary. The two countries also agreed to share the tax revenue from mineral exports from the territory between the 23rd and 25th parallel south. The bipartite tax collecting caused discontent, and the treaty lasted only 8 years. Secret Alliance Treaty of 1873. In February 1873, Peru and Bolivia signed a treaty of alliance against Chile. Its last clause kept it secret as long as both parties considered its publication unnecessary. It was revealed in 1879. Argentina, involved in a long-standing dispute with Chile over the Strait of Magellan and Patagonia, was secretly invited to join the pact. And in September 1873 the Argentine Chamber of Deputies approved the treaty and $6 million for war preparations. Eventually Argentina and Bolivia did not agree about the territories of Tarija and Chaco, and the former feared a Chile-Brazil axis. The Argentine Senate postponed and later rejected the approval, but 1875 and 1877, after the border disputes with Chile flared up anew, she sought to join the treaty. At the onset of the war, in a renewed attempt, Peru offered Argentina the Chilean territories from 24 degrees to 27 degrees if Argentina adhered the pact and fought the war. Historians including G. Bonis Basadre and Irigoyen agree that the real intention of the treaty was to compel Chile to modify its borders according to the geopolitical interests of Argentina, Peru and Bolivia, as Chile was militarily weak, that is, before the arrival of the Chilean ironclads Cochrane and Blanco Encalada. Chile was not informed about the pact, but learned of it first cursorily through a leak in the Argentine Congress in September 1873, when Argentina's Senate discussed the invitation to join the Peru-Bolivia alliance. Peruvian mediator Antonio de Laval stated in his memoirs that he did not learn of it until March 1879, and Hilarion Duzza was only informed about the pact in December 1878. Peruvian historian Keysanger states that one of Peru's reasons for signing the treaty was to impede a Chile-Bolivia alliance against Peru that would have given to Bolivia the region of Arica and transferred Antofagasta to Chile. These Chilean offers to Bolivia to change allegiance were done several times even during the war, and also from the Bolivian side at least 6 times. On December 26, 1874, the recently built ironclad Cochrane arrived in Valparaiso. It remained in Chile until the completion of the Blanco Encalada. It threw the balance of South Pacific power towards Chile. Historians disagree about how to interpret the treaty. Some Peruvian and Bolivian historians assess it as rightful, defensive, circumstantial, and known by Chile from the very onset. Conversely, some Chilean historians assess the treaty as aggressive against Chile, causative of the war, designed to take control by Peru of the Bolivian Salitre and hidden from Chile. The reasons for its secrecy, its invitation to Argentina to join the pact, and Peru's refusal to remain neutral are still being discussed. Boundary Treaty of 1874. In 1874, Chile and Bolivia replaced the 1866 Boundary Treaty, keeping the boundary at 24th parallel, but granting Bolivia the authority to collect all tax revenue between the 23rd and 24th parallels south, as compensation for the relinquishment of its rights. Chile did receive a 25 years guarantee against tax increases on Chilean commercial interests and their exports. All disputes arising under the treaty would be settled by arbitration. Causes of the war. American historian William F. Sater gives several possible and non-contradictory reasons for the beginning of the war. Chile was devastated by the economic crisis of the 1870s and was looking for a replacement for its silver, copper, and wheat exports. It has been argued that the economic situation and the view of new wealth in nitrate was the true reason for the Chilean elite to go into war against Peru and Bolivia. The holder of the Chilean nitrate companies, says Sater, bulldozed the Chilean president Aníbal Pinto into declaring war. U.S. historian Frederick B. Pike calls this allegation absurd, and W. Sater states that this interpretation overlooks certain important facts. The Chilean investors in Bolivia feared that Daza, the Bolivian dictator, would use, as he did, the war as an excuse to expropriate his investments. Among them were Melchor de Conca y Toro, the political powerful president of Chile's Cámara de Diputados, Geronimo Urmeneta, and Lorenzo Claro, a Chilean founder of the Banco de Bolivia and a prominent member of the National Party. A Santiago newspaper claimed that Melchor de Conca y Toro offered President Pinto $2 million to end the dispute and return to the 1874 boundary line. In other words, writes W. Sater, there were as many powerful interests opposed to helping the Compañía de Salitres as there were those seeking to aid the corporation. Also, far core objects to the argument. On the other hand, the sorry state of the Chilean armed forces at the outbreak of the war, as will be discussed in the following chapter, hardly supports a theory of conscious, premeditated aggression. Sater cites also another sources that state that the true causes of the conflict are not economic but geopolitical, a struggle for control of the southeastern portion of the Pacific Ocean. So in 1836 the Peruvian government tried to monopolize the commerce in the South Pacific by rewarding ships which sailed direct to Callao in detriment of Valparaiso, and Peru tried to impede the agreement reached between Spain and Chile in order to free its new warships built and embargoed in Britain during the Chincha War. Sater cites Germany's minister in Chile who argued that the war between Peru and Bolivia would have erupted sooner or later, and, on any pretext, he opined that Bolivia and Peru had developed a bitter envy against Chile and its material progress and good government. Frederick B. Pike states, the fundamental cause for the eruption of hostilities was the mounting power and prestige and the economic and political stability of Chile, on one hand, and the weakness and the political and economic deterioration of Bolivia, on the other. The war, and its outcome, was as inevitable as the 1846–1848 conflict between the United States and Mexico. In both instances, a relatively well-governed, energetic, and economically expanding nation had been irresistibly tempted by neighboring territories that were underdeveloped, malgoverned, and sparsely occupied. Another reason, states Sater, was Peru's want to monopolize and appropriate the nitrate works to strengthen its nitrate monopoly, and in order to achieve it, the Bolivian and Chilean salita had to be controlled by Peru. As unenviable as Chile's situation was, that of Peru was much worse. The 1870s was for Peru's economy a decade of crisis and change. Nitrate extraction rose while guano exports, the source of substantial revenue for the Peruvian state, declined from 575,000 tons in 1869 to less than 350,000 tons in 1873, and the Chincha Islands and other guano islands were depleted or nearly so. William Edmondson states in A History of the British Presence in Chile, Peru has its own reasons to enter the dispute. Rory Miller argues that the depletion of guano resources and poor management of the economy in Peru had provoked a crisis. This has caused Peru to default on its external debt in 1876. In that year, 1875, the Peruvian government decided to procure a loan of £7 million, of which £4 million were earmarked to purchase privately owned oficinas, salita, and Peru defaulted again in 1877. To increase guano revenue, Peru created a monopoly of nitrate commerce in 1875. The aims of the monopoly were to increase prices, curb exports, and so to impede competition. But most larger nitrate firms opposed the monopoly on sales of nitrate. When this was unsuccessful, in 1876, Peru began to expropriate nitrate producers, and to buy nitrate concessions such as that of Henry Meggs in Bolivia. But the CSFA was too expensive and could not be purchased. As Peruvian historian Alejandro Reyes states, this needed also the control over the Bolivian salita, and that was the internationalization of the conflict, because they were in the hands of Chilean and British capitalists. Later, as the Chilean company was to be auctioned on 14 February 1879 in Antofagasta, it was considered that the Peruvian consul would be the highest bidder. But some sources, says Sater, see the declarations of war between Chile and Peru as a product of popular domestic forces, that is, the president had to enter into war or to abandon and cede. Sater cites the Briton minister in Lima, Spencer Street, John. The rival parties may try to make political capital out of jealousy for the national honor, and His Excellency, Peruvian President Prado, may be forced to give way to the popular sentiment. Pinto was under similar pressures. For Bruce Farquhar, this seems to be the main cause for the war outbreak, as he states.